All right, we are back after a long break, and I am really excited to be sitting down today with Max Webster of Hivemind.vc, okay, Hivemind Ventures, and he's one of my favorite VCs in the space. He has an incredible energy. He's always filled with positivity. He's super fun. He's elusive. He's very hard to pin down. Let me tell you, I've been trying to get this on the books for a while. He's been in hiding in his secret lab, working on a few things in his secret lair. Let's just do a quick little intro here for those of you who want to learn more about Max. Hivemind.vc is the website. Just so you know, he has a ton of awesome writings that span on everything from energy, solar AI, Nostr. He's been obsessed with all that stuff. He's an amazing guy. I encourage you to check all this out and read it for yourself. Also, he has a TradFi background. He's got a very interesting background here, and he's co-founded one Bitcoin company or initiative down in Mexico, which I'm hoping to find out a little bit more about too. And it's Max A. Webster on Twitter for anyone who wants to give him a follow and hang out with him. Max A. Webster, and you can copy that NPub, which is where probably all the spicy stuff is said. I'm hanging out with Max today. I'm super excited. We're going to talk about funds. We're going to talk about the state of Bitcoin venture capital, maybe a few of our co-investments, talk about some tips for founders and things that are out there. Without further ado, Max, how are you today?
Well, I'm good, Buzz. Thank you very much. That was a very kind intro. Definitely not too much of a secret lair, but it has been a busy couple of years building Hivemind. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun to watch all this unfold. I haven't done any this style of interview in a while, but it feels good to come out and do it on a day like today. I think a lot of the Bitcoin community is probably pretty stoked, touching all-time highs. Maybe we'll even touch 100K by the end of the day. Who knows? So it's an interesting and exciting time. It's been a long time coming.
Yes. And on a day like today, we might even happen on this show. So who knows what's going to happen, because anything can happen in Bitcoin. All right. So let's talk about your move from traditional venture capital to the Bitcoin space. I'm not sure because it blends together, but the very first adopting Bitcoin in El Salvador was right around the time where I at least found out about Max Webster and what you were doing, and you had written your first paper. So can you talk a little bit about how you moved from traditional VC into the Bitcoin space?
Sure. Yeah, I would use the term TradFi pretty loosely there, but my first love was energy. And so I did read about Bitcoin when I was in university in 2011, and I thought it was interesting. I forgot about it. I did not buy any. Obviously wish I had, which is why I have a phone with outside LPs now. But my other big love in college was definitely the energy markets, and solar in particular. And so for whatever reason, I definitely get obsessed when I see some kind of exponential curve or an S curve of adoption or price really falling quickly. And I saw solar falling off of a cliff back in 2011, 2012. And I remember telling my teachers and friends at the time, if this continues, solar is going to be it's going to be the cheapest source of energy in the world by 2020. And it'll all be crazy. So that was impossible. But if I've learned one thing, when you see one of these exponential curves or S curves getting ripping, which I think is what we're seeing in Bitcoin as well, never take the under. And so I left college and got into the energy industry. I did a couple of startups, which did not work out, but I certainly learned a lot. And then I joined Bright, which is like Sunrun for Mexico. It's a residential solar finance in late 2014, and was down there in Mexico for several years. While I was down there, I got re-obsessed with Bitcoin, or obsessed for the first time, initially read about it. And I think I take a bit of a different view than most folks on what Bitcoin is and what really got me interested. I actually was looking at Ethereum first, and I was interested in some of these decentralized energy trading projects, things like Grid Plus River at the time, because I was interested in how our solar customers could trade a ledger of kilowatt hours with one another in a decentralized manner. And as I started going down the rabbit hole and I got deeper and deeper in Bitcoin, what I started realizing is that really what Bitcoin is a ledger of kilowatt hours, or a ledger of what I think of as the only real currency in the known universe, which is joules, calories, energy, whatever name you want to call it. And many of my personal heroes, Buckminster Fuller chiefly, also Tesla, Edison, Ford, many people, many great minds have seen energy-backed money coming for a long time. As I got deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, I started realizing, holy shit, like all this crypto blockchain stuff is mostly mumbo jumbo. And even for Bitcoin, it's just an enabling technology. What I think it really is, it's a ledger of kilowatt hours. It's that got my conviction really built up around Bitcoin. I left Bright in 2018. I knew I wanted to do something around payments in Latin America because that's where I was living at the time. So I did some work with BitSale, looking at how we could use Bitcoin for payments. We actually got Coinbase's nonprofit to give away the Bitcoin. It was actually quite fun. I got to actually use some Spanish, which was cool, and do a bunch of presentations. And for folks that held that Bitcoin, I think we gave it around like 400 folks. They've done pretty well. They held since 2018. Anyways, but when I quickly realized that payments was never going to work the base layer, that's what got me into the Lightning Network. And it was still too early in 2018 to really, I think, make big bets on Lightning yet. So I ended up getting an opportunity to join a different venture fund, which is what you're referencing with TradFi. That is a very early stage fund called Version 1 Ventures. I was there doing our both crypto and energy and climate stuff. And I was there for a little over a year and a half, got to see some incredible stuff. We worked with a lot of other great funds like Union Square Ventures, mostly on the energy side. And then on the crypto side, we did all of the Ethereum stuff. Like we did Uniswap pre-token launch, super rare, open, all these old Ethereum projects. And I thought it was interesting and on paper was doing very well. But yeah, in the back of my head, I couldn't just scratch this. I couldn't get rid of this feeling that it was all sort of decentralization theater. And so I remember asking all the entrepreneurs, do you run a full node for your ecosystem? And I've said this a couple of times before, but do you have a guess at how many said yes?
Not many.
It was zero. And that's when I started getting in the Big Short. And I was like, yeah. And I had discussions with folks. So this decentralization really matters. And not only does it matter, it's the only thing. Otherwise, I've got a great solution for it. It's a MySQL database. And so I knew I had to make this big bet. And so I left and then raised my first fund in 2021, Hivemind 1. And that was a $21 million fund focused on investing in, I would say, more of the infrastructure side or on the Lightning Network and some applications. I invested in around 40 companies. $21 million, usually check size between 250K to a mil. And then finished deploying that last year and started raising Hivemind Fund 2 this year and basically doing very similar, but now focused much more on what I think is the application phase. So that would be instead of like in Fund 1, companies like Thinking Labs and Lightspark and Breeze and Deloitte, companies that are really focused on infrastructure. I'll be now in Fund 2, got to represent these guys, open source everything. And now in Fund 2, I'm thinking we're a bit more ready for applications. And so I'm very focused on Nostr because I think that gives some of the missing identity and data transfer stuff that you need with Bitcoin, with Lightning Network to build fully functional apps. And from Fund 1, I did invest in companies like Fountain and Stacker News and very big bull on Stacker News. So there were a couple of folks that were able to do both the protocol and the app step layer, but very rare. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of those in the coming years.
Okay, so you said a lot there, and we could talk for hours here, but then we wouldn't get anything done. All right, so I want to start with just a few portfolio companies that we share. We had some co-investments. We raised our first fund, which was not 21 million. But right around the same time we were deploying, I want to talk about how that's shaking out now as well. But just off the top of my head, because Max does not have portfolio companies listed on his website, but he's given me permission to at least share a few that I know of from memory. Azteco, we're a co-investor in. How about Wavelake is another one where we co-invested together. Obviously, we had syndicate deals for Fountain and LN Bits, which we hopefully are going to get live on Thunder Funder here shortly. So
There's projects out there for sure.
So look, I have so much stuff to talk to you about as far as Lightning, Nostr, all that. But I just have to say, you said a lot there with your first fund in terms of check sizes and portfolio construction and how you think about that. Going in before you raised the fund, can you talk about maybe how much you left for follow-on rounds and how you view that? Do you still have some dry powder for follow-on rounds from that first fund? Is it fully deployed? How does that look?
Yeah, Fund 1 is, I would say, not fully deployed, but mostly deployed. We do have some reserves. We also have the ability to hold some Bitcoin as a reserve asset in both funds. And so we have some of that for a few potential follow-ons. We have the option to do Fund 1, but that's, I would say, 95% deployed. There would only be very special circumstances where that would happen. I'm focused right now on deploying out of Fund 2. So that's where 100% of my effort is focused there. And I've been doing smaller check sizes, given that it was obviously much easier to raise during the bull. And so I've been a bit more the 2021 bull, although that's changing again now. We're back in there. So I've been a bit more, I would say, judicious with check size coming out of fund two, but very focused on fund two. We've done a couple of follow-ons out of fund two as well. And my philosophy on that is the real big wins for a seed fund or a pre-seed fund, I like playing the absolute early stage. I like being the absolute first check-in. It's more important to me to be the absolute first check-in on as many really promising projects as I can. And then if we really have some great breakouts, we do have some opportunity to follow on through the funds. But I'm also open to doing like SPDs or something like that. We have something, for example, like a company like a Saccharines or something, where I think in the future, maybe I'd want to really triple down on that.
Okay, boy, and just as we're talking, I'm having some flashbacks here. I remember another one that really doesn't, it's not really huge, a known name, but Federated Computer.
Yeah, that's right.
David Young, absolutely on fire. Okay, Fund 2 now is raised. It's raised and done, or you're still raising it, or is it,
Stories.
so it's done?
Playing as I go.
Did you find it hard to go back to LPs from your first fund once everything locked up? I think that we only had two IPOs on record for 2024. Two tech IPOs. I believe it was the worst year ever. '01, '08. I think it's actually the worst ever. I think 2021, there was like maybe 500 or so. Did you find it hard going back to LPs saying, hey, I'm raising a fund 2, and not being able to have distributed from fund 1?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, look, there's no question that when interest rates were super low and Bitcoin was ripping in that first 2021 or 2022 period, of course, it was easier for everyone to raise up and down the stack without a doubt. I do think those conditions are changing again. So we're entering that world, which is great for fund managers like us and for the companies. But I also think that, look, at the end of the day, I certainly, like I said, I've been more judicious, but I think that there are people that get the big vision. And while Fund 2 is not yet as large as Fund 1 was, there have been a lot of my diehards that they get the vision. They understand that we're very well positioned. To understand that, you have to basically be taking a bet that for 3 years, people just did not understand what was happening with Bitcoin, that we were going to enter a new bull run, that all of these companies are building in the dark for 3 years. And when they do explode, man, they're going to be able to raise on great terms. Also, another very interesting fact is that these companies do hold Bitcoin themselves. And so that's also been super interesting in that I think the whole venture capital asset class can be very different for these, at least this first or second round of Bitcoin companies. Eventually this will become normal. But if you can save some meaningful percentage of your treasury in hard money versus monopoly money, then all of a sudden you get free extended runway. And obviously there's some risk on that, and by all of our companies having cash in hand to pay their employees first. But I think that means when they do come back out to the markets, they're going to be able to raise at better terms. But yeah, to your original question, I'm fortunate to have ride or die LPs that understand the big long-term bet. And frankly, a lot of my LPs are also either other funds in Silicon Valley or GPs at other funds. And for them, it's the call option to say, look, if this crazy Bitcoin guy is right, we want to make sure we have first access to do some of those markups at the Series A or the Series B. And I'm starting to see more and more interest coming around from those guys who are looking to, oh shit, you're right.
All right. So I definitely want to talk about the Bitcoin treasury and how that can work for you or against you. And one thing that I've always known, just as an outsider and not an investor in one of your funds or in your fund 1, is that Bitcoin treasury, right? Having the ability to hold a portion of that in Bitcoin. First off, is that difficult is that set up? You have to excuse me. I'm not a Yale fellow and I don't have all the history that you do. My fund was very cut and dry. There's no crypto or digital assets. It's a cookie cutter first fund sort of structure that I was able to spin out of the box. But to be able to hold a percentage of that in Bitcoin, first off, is that technically like more of a hedge fund? Because I know hedge funds do all those type of strategies.
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually did explore this for fun too, if I wanted to be able to hold more in Bitcoin. And to be clear, this is a small position for the fund relative to all of the portfolio. And I view it as this reserve asset that gives us the ability to do potentially follow-on rounds later on if the Bitcoin does very well. But there's something called NQI, or a non-qualifying investment. So a venture capital fund can hold up to 20% of their fund in non-qualifying investments. So in theory, that could be stocks or other assets as well. There's like some other exotic things. Without getting into too many specifics, there's one company where I really wanted to invest. I'm extremely bullish on it. I'm not supposed to talk about it just yet, but that was a case where I had to go through a different kind of vehicles that ended up counting against the NQI as well. That was when I could make it work. And so that reduced the amount that we could hold Bitcoin. But we've never held more than 20%. And so it's a nice juice if it works out, but the focus of the fund is invest in the absolute best companies, the absolute earliest stage, and let the rest run.
So let's talk about it working out, because that goes both ways, and how you think about a Bitcoin treasury when you're a founder or in your position as a GP. It's not without risk. In my position, when we started raising that first fund, it was August 2021, and it was a very low minimum, of course. What was that?
A good time. It was a much better time than raising in 2023.
Yes, it depends on how you look at it. Valuations, froth, getting boxed out of rounds. And by the time you circle back with the founder, it's filled. A lot of pre-product, pre-revenue, oversubscribed. I'm glad that's not the case now. But maybe Bitcoin was right around, I don't know, let's say about 65,000 or so. And maybe one of my LPs on a much smaller scale than yours, maybe they sold half a Bitcoin and they invested in my fund, okay? Coin went on a ride from there, right? So down to 18, 20,000, 22,000. And my fund updates, granted, it wasn't a huge markup. Maybe there was a single digit markup when Bitcoin is 40,000. So it works out in some cases, right? Now, holding a percentage of your treasury in Bitcoin, is that something that you just have to ride out? And now there's some fresh powder there that you could deploy. And it goes the other way too. One of my favorite portfolio companies, I love them. They YOLO to death, Scarcity. They have their entire Bitcoin treasury, or their entire treasury is in Bitcoin. And I remember around the 18,000, they had the ramen jokes and everything else. And now it's silly where they're at. How did that work out for you at that point in time, doing the Bitcoin treasury versus now, right? Now you have a fund too that's larger. And if it was before the election or whenever you closed it, if you did that same NQI strategy somewhere a while ago, you're already banging a major paper markup now at this point in time.
A couple of things. Again, I wouldn't oversell how much this is going to shift things for me, at least, or for our fund, because at the end of the day, even if you have a major markup on BTC, at the end of the day, what drives returns for an early pre-seed fund is I want to invest in the 1,000 bagger, right? All the other stuff is nice and it buys us more runway and potentially the ability to do some important follow-ons. But what I'm really interested in is Alby going to become a multi-billion-dollar company? Is Stacker needs to be a multi-billion-dollar company? Llama, like all of these companies that I'm very bullish on. That's where the return comes. I think of it as it's nice and it's interesting that we have a little extra juice from the Bitcoin. It's nice that a lot of our companies have a little extra runway or juice. I think it gives them, it's a tool to potentially have more runway and negotiate better terms. But at the same time, like at the end of the day, like what can drive the fund or not is, did we get it first for a truly generational company? And that's one the business did. In terms of the Bitcoin treasury strategy for companies, look, I mean, it's a great question. And I certainly don't prescribe to my founders what's the right strategy. Every founder has to make that decision for themselves. And I'm always a voice of, hey, make sure that you have enough to pay your guys for at least a year. But beyond that, I agree with Alex Leishu from River, another one of our portfolio companies I'm very bullish on, which is he had a tweet out there is, do you believe in this stuff or not? And I certainly understand that as an investor and for LPs, we're all probably very long Bitcoin. And you don't necessarily want to take on that additional risk of being too crazy. But if you've got enough runway to survive for the years you need to make payroll, and you also have this potential upside, I think at the end of the day, we're not cosplaying here. We really believe that Bitcoin is going to become the new financial network for the world, and that the assets can go way up. I think every founder makes their decision. Some keep a lot, some keep a little, but I think as long as you feel comfortable making your payroll for minimum 12 months, many people are saying 24 months, then I agree with Alex. Do you believe in this or not?
So you heard it there, YOLO into Bitcoin with your corporate treasury. All right.
With the caveat, obviously make your payroll, yes.
All right. I'm joking for sure. All right. So first off, Lightning. You were obsessed with Lightning. You came in hard. It's a joke. And there are a lot of people who say it right now. Has Lightning failed, in your opinion?
Absolutely not.
There are people out there that are championing that Lightning has failed.
I can't imagine making that argument. Look, what I would say is, if you believed that the Lightning Network was going to be a way for every human on the planet to have a non-custodial, like their own channel to move Bitcoin, then you would say it's been a failure so far. Personally, I've never really subscribed to that view. I'm not saying it's impossible, and there are technological changes on the horizon, things like covenants with channel factories, things like that can make it possible. But I've always viewed the Lightning Network as a perfect, instant, low cost, if not free, settlement network. And I would say over time, I thought maybe early on I was a little bit more bullish on some of the payment stuff, and now it's a bit more. I would say I've shifted more to the settlement network. But where I see it now is we're having the Cambrian explosion of Bitcoin scaling technologies, right? And some of them are super centralized, and that would be things like a Strike or a Cash App or a River. All of those guys plug into the Lightning Network and can use it perfectly right now, today. It's a 100% success to move money back and forth between each other, almost zero cost, almost instantly. That's way better than anything else happening in the traditional financial rails. Similarly, though, you have these new sort of, I would say, final mile scaling solutions. And this would be things like eCashments. This would be things like Spark, which was recently announced for Light Spark, which is based on some state chain research. You've got all of these other sort of potentially some of the stuff like from Alpen Labs, Rollups. It's another company that we're invested in. And maybe, I don't know which of those is going to become the dominant, and maybe there isn't a dominant. Maybe it's going to be a distribution of, some people use eCash and some people use Spark, dollars even issued as eCash backed by Bitcoin, or dollars issued on top of Spark. But the key thing is they all speak the Lightning Network for this instant final settlement. So increasingly, the way I view my sort of view of the whole market is Bitcoin's the decentralized network for value, Lightning the decentralized network for settlement, and then I'm sure we'll talk more about this later, but Nostr is the decentralized network for identity and data transfer. Each of those things are very powerful on their own, but when you combine them together, that's when you really start building crazy stuff. And one kind of like request for proposal that I would love to see is, I think that the Lightning Network has been underutilized as the way to get value in and out of Bitcoin. And so the potential is there right now. You're already seeing with companies like Lightspark, they're plugging in with the new banks of the world. That's a really big deal, or arguably the most important fintech in the world right now, like today, not theoretical, is moving money over the Lightning Network between fiat currencies, between Brazil and the United States using Lightning Network. Real. Coinbase now finally has a Lightning Network. It only took 4 years, but people are actually using Bitso just went live today. So there is real usage in those traditional markets. However, I think that one thing people are going to be shocked on is, John Pfeffer wrote a really interesting piece back in 2017, December 2017, which is the utility token. And the idea was that if Bitcoin is this network for value, you have all of these other competing networks, including the shitcoin networks, the Solanas, the Ethereums, the Polygons, the whatever. You can bridge between all of the networks using the Lightning Network. And the way I think about it is, it's if you go, and I think he saw this, he didn't see exactly the Lightning Bridge piece, or at least he didn't write about it, but I think his fundamental thesis is playing out here. Historically, I've stored my money in US dollars because that was the best store value. And then if I went into Chuck E. Cheese's, I had to transfer it to the Chuck E. Cheese token to play their game, and storing my money in Chuck E. Cheese tokens, or a casino, you have casino chips ball up. I think the same thing is going to play out here with the Lightning Network, where there's a huge opportunity. This is what companies I'm gunning for, if anyone's listening to this, to build an exchange that moves value instantly using Lightning Network to keep Bitcoin and whatever scaling solutions end up winning, whether that's the eCash stuff, existing chains like Solana or Polygon. Any of those chains that have HTLCs can also build Lightning Network on top of there. And once you can have Bitcoin and these other assets that can be instantly swapped, potentially trustlessly between each other using Lightning Network, then that opens up what I think is going to be the real Coinbase. So I think Coinbase is like AOL. Whoever built this giant exchange between Bitcoin and all the different scaling solutions using the Lightning Network, I think that's potentially their really big company to build.
So in your piece, Why Lightning, Why Now, you predicted a massive Lightning Network adoption. Do you see that coming now? Because when you look at sort of the growth, and I want to talk about Nostr next, when you looked at the growth, I don't know if that was hindered by political, a number of things, but do you see that starting now? Is that what we're seeing now?
Yes. I would say, look, I definitely think it's been a little bit slower than I expected when I published that piece, which I remember that might have been 21 or 22. But my big take on all of this, Bitcoin, Lightning, everything is just zoom out. At the end of the day, this is still, we're building something that's going to last really for millennia. And in the grand scheme of things, 3 years, 4 years is very small. And I would say the most bullish thing on Lightning right now, one, if you haven't used an app like Stack or News, try it. It's so easy. And now you can even do it non-custodially using Nostr Wallet Connect from Alby, which is something else we can talk more about. But that standard of just like payment experience, there's nothing else like it on the internet. For anyone that thinks it's a failure, literally go and connect a wallet to Stack or News. You can even do it non-custodially. and just have the experience of sending a zap seamlessly, instant final settle. It's crazy. So that's the first thing I would say. But in terms of the real adoption, I think the big story right now is Lightspark, frankly. The fact that they have, I can't understate how big of a deal it is that Nubank is actually plugged into Lightning, actually running trials as we speak with real user numbers. Nubank, for those who don't know, is like the largest fintech in Latin America, dominant in Brazil, growing quickly in Mexico and Colombia. Some might argue is the most important fintech in the world today. That's a really big deal. And now you also already have Jack Dorsey, who's obviously early to the party, Cash App plugged into the network as well. So in theory, you now have the ability for someone to send dollars in the United States, and there's still some user experience that needs to get fleshed out, and I expect that to happen this year. But dollars in the United States to reales in Brazil, and all that happening over Lightning and using Bitcoin, you need to know it. That's real. That's possible today. So I do think we're entering the S-curve adoption, the more exponential piece of the S-curve.
So Max is notoriously early with his investments. He just said it. He likes to be the first check in very early. And when you're thinking about Nostr, is it too early? Look at where we're at with Bitcoin this far down. And it's a joke. It's right. No one uses Bitcoin because they really don't for the most part. I think we're at a point where if you took 100 random people and said, who here has Bitcoin, maybe you'd get one or two hands. But if you said, who here's heard of Bitcoin, you'd probably get most of the hands up, right? So I think that's where we're at. And when you look at sort of Nostr growth, and you were focused on this, and I don't want to use the word obsessed, but we know that you were obsessed with Nostr pretty early on. Do you think it's too early to be deploying capital into this area? Do you see this as viable businesses when you think about maybe a similar valuation that you can get from an early stage Bitcoin company versus Nostr? Or do you see them converging? What do you think?
I definitely see them converging. I think obviously timing markets is challenging. And if I have one big risk with my funds, and I've had some of my mentor incredible LPs basically tell me is you may be one cycle too early to things. And that's certainly possible. But here's the deal. I look at it as in the game. I took about 40 investments in Fund 1. And usually is the first money in, usually very good valuations. One of those to 1,000x, right? Like ideally, we're going to have a whole bunch of companies do very well. But I look at the particular game that I'm playing is I'm in the game of outlier hunting. And there are other investors that are frankly much better, much more suited to do more growth stage stuff. And I would say it's definitely too early for most investors to be playing this field. But I think about it, it's once something becomes consensus, I think your chance at the 1,000x is probably gone. And I think about a company, for example, they raised their last round for pretty high valuations in the 2021, 2022 bull. That seed round got done 6 years prior, something like that, 5 years prior. And I would much rather have the valuation that they got when it was quote unquote way too early getting at that. If you can get it in a sub 2 mil post, then obviously you want to take that shot all day, every day. And so that's the way I think about Nostr as well. It feels to me a lot like the people that bet on Bitcoin in 2011. Was it too early? Absolutely, it was too early. People that bet on it were absolutely batshit insane. Can they also make billions of dollars? And to me, it's much more, it's not, like this company idea or this specific market segment. I need to have a thesis about how things could play out and a story at how this could get really big and actually believe. And then it's about finding the right entrepreneurs that can weather the storm. Because I think so much of entrepreneurship and investing is like surfing. You can be the most shredded dude out there. It doesn't matter. You have to be able to be in the water when the wave hits. And so one thing I really pride myself on is I have invested in a lot of Nostr companies, even though a lot of it's just early build. But I look at it as I'm investing in people that have really interesting theses. And I believe most of these are cockroaches that if it takes a couple of extra years, so be it. They're prepared to weather that storm. And I think I'm prepared to ride with them. And the opportunity though, for that outlier return, that's what I want. And I think you have to be a little bit early. We'll see. I also would say that these things, once they start running, can happen fast. People think Nostr, for those who don't know, it's a public-private key identity system, which then posts data, signed messages to a free market of relays. And came out in the Bitcoin Lightning community. Lightning payments are already integrated. And you can build things like, for example, Primal, which is like a Twitter clone, or Damus that already has Lightning payments built in. But then you can take that same identity and plug it in and bring it with you, bring your social graph with you. And I think the best example we've seen of that today is a company like Fountain, where I can take my Nostr identity for Primal, plug it into Fountain, and now see all my friends, what podcast they're listening to. zap them, pay them tips for discovering great podcasts. That's a brand new social experience that couldn't exist before. And to me, that is mind blowing. And I see these companies and these builders, guys like Oscar and Million, like they're not going to fold. They're going to, it takes an extra couple of years to be it. But I think people are also underestimating. I go back and forth in this all the time on, will Nostr bring more people to Bitcoin, or will Bitcoin bring more people to Nostr? I can make a strong case either way, I believe. But if Bitcoin starts running, which it is, and Nostr clients are one of the easiest way for people to get started and start earning Bitcoin, we could see an absolute explosion this year. And then people start realizing, holy shit, not only am I making money on this thing, but like it has these incredible other novel app experiences, like the ability to take my social graph with me from my Twitter client and now discover better podcasts because I can actually see what my friends are listening to. Marketplaces, things like local Bitcoins, I think that's going to get rebuilt as well on top of Nostr. I think it's just once it starts running, it's gonna explode some minds.
So Bitcoin, Nostr work hand in hand, and then most recently AI. The AI and Bitcoin convergence. So your recent writing suggests that AI agents will need Bitcoin and Lightning for economic interactions. Can you expand on how you see this AI Bitcoin integration developing?
Yeah, so I published my AI thesis, hivemind.vc/AI. It's a little bit dated now, actually. I think it was maybe a year and a half ago. But high level, the AI boom is real. And I think this is one kind of benefit from being in San Francisco is I'm seeing so much developer activity around agents and open source AI stuff as well. It's really cool to see. And one thing that I've always liked, just was very obvious to me immediately, is look, if you have all these autonomous agents that are working not only with humans, but also with each other, one, how many agents are going to be? There's 8 billion humans. I'm expecting orders of magnitude more agents eventually, right? So let's say trillions of agents. And they think that these agents, there's no way JP Morgan is banking the agent. I saw this one tweet a year or so ago, and I almost laughed. I was like, is this guy serious? He's a smart guy. But I was almost like, this is some like serious like delusion where he was like, we need to set it up so that every agent can start their own LLC, access the AC agent. I was like, bro, the AIs are not waiting 3 days and paying whatever $200 a year for an L. That's crazy. And it's just like whenever you see a new technology wave, the first kind of, I don't know, wave of companies and projects that get built, it looks at, oh, hey, there's this old paradigm. We're just going to bolt something new on top. Look, there's agents, put them in the banking system. But then what really happens is you realize we have what I call a phase shift or metamorphosis into a brand new economic pair. And that's what I think is going to happen here is the AIs, they're going to need something that is composable. They're going to need a payment network that is instant. And they're going to need a payment network that moves around actual viable money. I think, again, coming back to Bitcoin being energy-backed money, that's what the AIs are going to want to interact with. The ability to potentially, and this is another reason I'm very bullish on Nostr, is like you can plug all these things together. Imagine a world where you have an NPub, a Nostr identity, and that NPub controls a fleet of other NPubs, each with their own wallet address using Nostr Wallet Connect. By the way, this is one of the beauties of Nostr is Linux, where in the early days, everyone thought, oh, this is just going to be something we run on our computers. And of course, that's not what happened. It ended up finding product market fit for the server. We're already seeing some of this unexpected product market or technology market fit for Nostr, where we had all these relays that were being run. And now people, originally the Alby team, and now lots of people, including Lightspark, are using these relays to pass Lightning Network invoices around. So with Nostr Wallet Connect, now the ability for these AIs to have their own identity on Nostr and use Nostr Wallet Connect and these relays to pass invoices back and forth between one another instantly. And you can link all of those payments up. One simple example is imagine I wanted to create, I don't know, an ad of some form. I said, okay, I want to farm out in real time, one bot to create the background, one bot to create the text, one bot to create the list that it needs to be distributed to, or whatever. And there's a construct in Nostr called data vending machines or DVMs, which is a little bit tongue in cheek with DVMs, the Ethereal Virtual Machine. This is the real world's computers, the DVM. But basically it allows for free markets or another way of saying this is an API for market intelligence, where I can say, I want a thing done and I want to farm out in real time, subdivide all the different tasks, farm it out and get the absolute best price to do that. And I think it's a very underexplored concept. It's still in the very tinkerer phase, but I think it's very powerful. And once we start seeing some interesting product experiences around, I think people are going to be shocked. Of course, the AIs are going to be able to work together and they need to page one another. And I think Bitcoin Lightning is going to be how it happens.
Isn't Max awesome? I can't think of another coin VC, we say Bitcoin VCs, that's really focused on the convergence of Nostr coin and AI, which is really cool. And we have a thesis when you raise a fund, and you can't steer from that thesis. And my thesis is limited to the Bitcoin space. Some theses, if you don't know, you can only invest in late stage companies or early stage companies. Some theses are limited on geography. And Max has a very flexible thesis here. So he could invest in all sorts of these other things. And I would have to say that's probably the differentiator that makes you very unique in your investment approach versus a lot of the other Bitcoin focused venture capitalists, is that you are really looking at a lot of these other technologies and how they might work with Bitcoin. Speaking of, on your website, fairly new, I never saw this before, and it says that you are focused on L2 and L3 Bitcoin startups. Maybe I'm just not remembering how long that's been on there before, but what do you define as a layer two and layer three sort of startup? And what really excites you the most about this world? When we think of layer two, I like to joke Lightning's the only layer two. That's the joke that exists right now. But how are you viewing this L2 and L3?
So first of all, it's much less spicy than you think. I actually have had that up there forever. So the definition isn't particularly groundbreaking. And I actually will mention as well, it's an old website. I hadn't really prioritized it, but I do have a new website in the works. It's taken a little longer than expected. I had to put it on the back burner, but who knows, maybe by the time this ships in the next week or two, we'll finally get it out. But the idea when I wrote that was I was already thinking that this idea of Lightning Network is the settlement network, that you're going to have it settled between lots of different things. And so my thesis was you could think of L3. So I'm not using this in a super strict sense. When I think of layer two, I agree with you. Something to be a real quote unquote layer on top of Bitcoin. I think the ability for unilateral exit, the ability to exit the system without trust or permission from anyone else is the key. And as of today, the Lightning Network is only the has that. But I think of layer threes as these kind of things that maybe not layer in the strictest sense, but the final mile scaling solution for Bitcoin. And at the time, I was thinking more, these are in the apps, right? So this could be the custodial apps, things like a fountain. At the time, Stacker News was custodial. Now I say I would expand that to include other scaling solutions, things like eCash, things like Spark that can plug into Bitcoin Lightning, but nothing particularly revolutionary there, but just thinking that L2 is really decentralized. And then there's going to be all kinds of apps on top of that, which may not be as decentralized. That's fine.
All right. So look, I know we're coming up on a few minutes here, and I want to get through this quickly. So a little bit of a lightning round on a few of these things here. Which areas of Bitcoin infrastructure do you think are undervalued right now? Are you putting a lot on the infrastructure sort of companies out there?
Not as much right now. That was a big focus for me in Fund One. I would say very bullish on Lightspark. I think like they're bringing this to the mainstream, and that's absolutely huge. Still bullish on though a lot of other companies. I think Lightning Labs, what they're doing, Taproot Assets, is really exciting. I think, frankly, what River is doing with Lightning Services is very exciting. I think Deloitte, some of the stuff they're doing with banking is very interesting. On the infrastructure side, I would say Albi, frankly, things I'm most excited on the infrastructure side right now are things that are starting to maybe tie a little bit with Nostr, so Nostr Wallet Connect. I think Nostr Wallet Connect is absolutely undervalued. I think it's becoming a standard for payments. And basically, it's a way to use Nostr relays to pass Lightning invoices around. Again, using that Linux example, no one, including me, could have predicted, or I certainly didn't predict, that we would use these always on 24/7 relays to pass Lightning invoices around. So I think Nostr Wallet Connect is huge. Lightspark announced that they've been working with the Albi team to ship that in their own products, which is absolutely huge. So I would say that's the area I'm most excited about. Some of the other Lightning infrastructure stuff I'm less focused on now. I think then like new competition or free market for scaling solutions is very interesting. And to be clear, I don't have a super clear crystal ball of what's going to win. I'm in the phase where Lightning is going to be the glue or the interconnectivity tissue that connects them, but who knows, right? I think Spark from Lightspark is very interesting. I think the eCash stuff that Callie's been working on is wild. I think the Fedimint stuff is still cool too, although we've seen some of the Cashew stuff get more early traction, but Fedimint still has really nice multi-sig properties, which I think could become big later on. Look, I think still someone's going to build that bridge. If you're the entrepreneur and you're listening to this and you want to build the real exchange between Bitcoin and all of the shitcoin chains using the Lightning Network, I think that's a huge piece of it. But I would say in terms of like raw, who's actually like managing liquidity, in Fund One, I also have a bunch of companies like EBA, like BitNob, like Pouch, like Neutron Pay that were regional exchanges and regional Lightning Network hubs. And I think my thesis there was always that if this is the new set of railroads, you want to own the Grand Central for every locale. And so I think those companies are very well positioned. And there's a few locales where someone hasn't built the dominant Bitcoin only exchange like road yet. But I would say I'm more focused at this point on the new stuff like Nostr.
Okay. And love all four of those companies that you mentioned there. Friends with all of them. We're lucky enough to be invested in two of them. You also mentioned Taproot Assets. Just to let everyone know, live on thunderfunder.com, our first deal is Jolts, who is leading the way with Taproot Assets. Okay, I want to get through this quick. Just two more quick questions. All right. So previously, there was a big geography focus with the Latin American market, LATAM, whether it was with your work with Bright in Mexico. Are you still bullish geography-wise with Latin America or anywhere in particular? Is that really a focus as far as adoption in Latin America? Do you see that sort of playing out as you envisioned, or is geography now no longer really a part of your thesis and focus?
Oh, it's definitely a part of my thesis. I mean, I think, again, I focus most heavily on that in Fund 1, although I'm still open to doing more of these in Fund 2. I think that there's always been a clearer case for using Bitcoin as a medium exchange, or at least using the Lightning Network to actually pass money around in countries where the banking system is non-existent or not functional. I'm very bullish on those companies like the BIPs. BIPA is actually exploding. I'm very bullish on those guys. I have made two recent investments in Latin America, in Yopaki, which is focused on Mexico, and in Osmo, which is focused on Central America. I think those guys are very well positioned as well. But yeah, I'm very bullish on emerging markets. I would say, though, at this stage, there are a couple of geographies I don't have. I would love to get a good one in India. I don't have that yet. But I think as big as all of that's going to be, that to me, those bets are like in some ways underwrites on my crazier side. That's like a dominant river-like exchange in each country because of its own unique regulatory environment, because of its own liquidity, whatever concerns for that Lightning node. I think we're going to see a lot of those winners, but I also don't think any of those are going to be Google, right? I think you can get certainly $1 billion plus exits as like unicorn fintechs, but I think that where I'm really excited right now is what's the absolute exploding opportunity. You can rip people's spaces. And I think that's more likely to come from something brand new, which is probably with AI agents, maybe something with interoperable services and data on Nostr. And I like the old, just connecting the old world to international payments. I think Lightspark again is like really leading the way there, but I'm much more interested in what's the 1,000 or 10,000x. I think that's going to be probably something with agents.
All right. And as time goes on, we're finding more co-investments. We're thrilled that we invested in Osmo right there alongside you. And I would have loved to invest in Yopaki, but we missed it. It was full and they didn't need our money, but they're awesome people. I love the team there and really cool marketing. I love everything that they're doing. It's so fun. And Abe from GetBit, now called Krobo, if you're listening, he's looking for something in India. Send him an email. All right. So finally, last question, maybe just one more a little bit. All right. But last question here. And look, this is a tricky one. All right. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but the learnings from Fund 1 to now for any emerging VCs out there like myself, if you did learn something from, be it stage, if anything that you learned with raising and deploying from your Fund 1, and now you're taking that knowledge into your Fund 2, is there anything that you can share?
Yeah, again, I would say I'd be hesitant to offer too much general advice. I think every case for every fund, every founder is super specific and unique. Like, a couple of things that do come to mind. One is it's the founder. Like you need to be in the right market to catch the wave. But at the end of the day, you bet on the right surfer and they're willing to stay in the water long enough, I think you're going to have a good outcome. The idea is interesting. The idea has changed so much. And I guess one thing that if I could maybe do slightly differently there's a few, just to me, like clear entrepreneurs who are just operating at a different level. I think Kian at Stack Raiders is one example of this, where it's like, I would just back that dude all day, every day, no matter what. And if you find one of those horses, man, just like, I think I would be a little bit more, and probably will in Fund 2, a bit more concentrated if I feel like I find one of these truly outlier entrepreneurs. I also think that one thing I want to add to my earlier things, I know we talked about the Bitcoin as a reserve asset, is that strategy can work very well if you're also someone who, frankly, is very cheap. And I think if you're betting in a very cyclical market like ours is, straight up, all the companies raised 2021, 2022, and then bear market, right? And I think it's about to go crazy again. You want to make sure you're betting cockroaches that are in it for the right reasons, that really care about this stuff and can last years, because it might be years before you see your next drop of funding. And so I think making sure there've been a couple of cases where I would be a bit on when money is a little bit easier. Having said that, on the flip side, I think one thing that I'm cognizant of, and I don't want to you always want to be careful with your biases. You don't shift too far from one extreme to the other, is when you do see that you have a quote unquote money machine that you can put one sat in and get two sats out, then it's challenging. It's something that I'm also finding challenging right now, to flip that mindset of, okay, we had to cockroach because that's the only thing we could do. There was no capital available to, oh my God, this thing is working, like raise, go out there, score zero, then win. And I think every entrepreneur is different there to figure that out. It's not my place to tell them how to do that, but at least to be a voice in their ear, say, hey, when times are tough, make sure we're cockroaching. And when things are working and we know we have a reliable money machine, spread.
Max, we got to cut it there. We could talk forever about all this stuff. All right. So I guess we'll have to do it again in the near future. By the time I start bugging you, we'll probably get it for September of 2025. By the time that you'll have time for me. But listen, do you have anything to say in closing? And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing the wisdom and hanging out.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. Like I said, hopefully I'll have a new website soon, hivemind.vc. Folks can DM me on Nostr, Twitter, if you're interested in learning more. For entrepreneurs, I would say I'm really interested in this sort of Lightning Network exchange idea right now. I am interested in India. I'm also very interested in people that are doing net novel things with Nostr and with the AI agent stuff. And so I'm excited about L4.2 protocol. I'm excited about DVMs. I'm excited about things like StemSturt, which was a way for people to make a song where you maybe do a beat and then someone else puts a vocal on top of it and then they get sucked into Wavelake and the DJ gets a cut. Like this idea of split payments or Alby's packaged app where open source developers can get programmatically split. I think these are net novel cases that Bitcoin, Lightning, and Nostr enable. If you're building something around that, let me know.
Nice. All right, Max. Listen, thanks for hanging and appreciate it. We'll talk to you and see you again soon, I hope.
Awesome. Thanks, man. This was fun.
Cheers.